You know what's strange? An entire generation learned how to grow up mostly on its own. No constant supervision, no smartphones tracking their location, no endless encouragement from adults, just a house key, a quiet afternoon, and the unspoken expectation that they would figure life out themselves. But here's something many people misunderstand about Generation X. They are often described as independent, skeptical, even emotionally distant. But those traits didn't appear randomly. They were shaped by a very specific childhood experience, one where kids quietly learned that the world wasn't always watching over them. Picture this. It is 1987. School ends in the afternoon, and millions of kids walk home to empty houses. They unlock the door, drop their backpacks, make a snack, and turn on the television. For a few hours, there are no adults, no guidance, no supervision, just time, silence, and responsibility that feels strangely normal. Think about it. When children repeatedly face small challenges alone, their brains begin wiring themselves for self-reliance. Psychologists call this early autonomy development. Instead of waiting for instructions, these kids experiment, adapt, and solve problems on their own. But here's the interesting part. Independence formed this early often hides a quieter emotional pattern. Many Gen X adults learned not to rely too heavily on others because early life taught them help might not always arrive. Now place that childhood inside the social world of the 1970s and 80s. Divorce rates were rising, both parents increasingly worked full-time, neighborhoods were filled with latchkey kids, children carrying house keys around their necks. Media was changing, culture was shifting, and families were learning new rhythms of independence. And without realizing it, an entire generation was practicing emotional self-management long before adulthood began. Researchers studying developmental psychology have long noticed something fascinating about autonomy in childhood. Studies on self-determination theory suggest that children who make decisions earlier often develop stronger internal motivation. But the story does not end there, because independence without guidance can also produce caution, skepticism, and a quiet habit of handling stress privately. But here's where things become even more interesting. Many Gen X adults did not just become independent, they became observers. Growing up without constant adult attention meant learning to read rooms, notice moods, and predict problems before they happened. And this subtle skill shaped their psychology. They trust experience more than promises, competence more than praise, and actions more than words. Here's what most people do not realize. When a generation learns early that safety depends partly on themselves, they develop a powerful internal compass. They measure the world quietly, carefully, and often skeptically. That is why many Gen X adults value practicality, resilience, and emotional control. Not because they were taught to ignore feelings, but because life trained them to navigate uncertainty alone. Sometimes psychologists describe this pattern as adaptive independence, a mindset formed when children repeatedly solve everyday problems without immediate rescue. Think about fixing a broken toy, negotiating with a sibling, deciding when homework must be finished, or learning which neighbors feel safe to trust. Each small decision trains the brain to evaluate risk and consequence. Over the years, those tiny judgments stack together, forming what researchers sometimes call practical intelligence. But here's the twist. Many Gen X adults still carry that quiet childhood program inside them. Even in workplaces, relationships, and parenting, they often assume responsibility first and ask for help later. It is not stubbornness exactly. It is the echo of thousands of afternoons where the rule was simple: figure it out yourself and keep going anyway. That lesson shaped confidence, caution, resilience, and the ingrained belief that survival begins with you. And maybe that is the strange legacy of Generation X, a generation that often looked unsupervised but was actually learning something profound: how to stand without constant applause, how to adapt when nobody is guiding you, and how to quietly build strength in ordinary afternoons spent alone. So the next time someone calls Gen X the forgotten generation, remember this: they might actually be the generation that practiced raising themselves. If you enjoy exploring the hidden psychology behind everyday life, consider subscribing for more stories like this.